What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Groomer Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Martin, and today we've got the grandmother of grooming on the podcast, as she's popularly known. Lesley Weeks has come on to join us today to share a little bit about how she got started in the industry and how things have changed. Lesley, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor for you to be here, and very crazy. You told me a crazy stat right before we hit record here that you were the first groomer in the city of Toronto. Is that right?
That is correct.
I mean, that is crazy. Did people even know what pet grooming was then, or no?
No, the veterinarians would primarily do most of the grooming back then.
Okay.
The dogs would come in the spring all hairy, and they'd walk out naked. And as I was going to university, I kept seeing all these naked dogs walking around. And I went, oh, this is terrible. And then I would talk to the people and say, I can make your dog look a lot prettier than what you're getting. And that's how Pampered Paws started as I was doing my graduate degree at U of T.
That's incredible. When was this? Not to date yet, but
Oh, that was 1978.
1978. Okay. So obviously things have changed quite a bit since then. I mean, now, Toronto has got, some of the grooming competitions now going on up there, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it is completely changed. So before we maybe even talk about how much it's changed, why don't you give just like a brief introduction to who you are and, obviously why people might call you the grandmother of grooming and all that sort of jazz, just for those out there that are listening that have never heard of you or met you before.
Sure. Well, as I say, I'm very grateful to be on your podcast telling my story. It all began March 19th, 1985, when I officially launched Pampered Paws. It was fueled by my love of animals, developed through basically years of dog showing and breeding. Particularly cherished are my standard and miniature schnauzers. Through them, I was inspired to create a space that celebrated the beauty of pets while ensuring they received the loving care that they all deserved. It was in this nurturing environment that I saw pets not just as clients, but beloved companions who deserved the best grooming experience possible.
That's awesome. So that was a little bit after you had got into grooming, right?
Yes, I worked in the insurance industry for a period of time after I finished my master's degree, and then didn't like the industry. It paid well, the hours were great, but there was no passion.
Mhm.
And for me, my artistic abilities had to come through. And it certainly wasn't happening through microfiche at the time. And probably people don't even know that word.
Yeah, I mean, it's just lost. That's awesome. Going from insurance to a world of pet grooming. I mean, you're right. That's a passion 180 right there.
Oh, yeah. I'm certain my parents rolled over in their grave when I made the move.
But obviously it worked out, right? So,
Oh, absolutely. And as I got started in 1985, I recognized that there was a real need for talent out there. There was no groomers in the city at the time. So I started to train some individuals, and I would no sooner get them trained, and the veterinarians were stealing them away
of course.
because they now were growing as well and didn't have as much time for the shave downs that they used to do.
Yeah, and maybe you were converting people away from those shave downs.
Absolutely. And so, because I couldn't find staff, I decided that I would set up a school
Okay.
because the gap was so significant. So in 1986, I opened our grooming school to train aspiring groomers to learn how to groom both the classic techniques of dog show trims and the innovative practices of a pet trim.
That's awesome. So Pampered Paws started as a salon and kind of morphed into a salon and grooming school.
That is correct. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I
And
saw you guys, obviously you're up in Canada, and now you have what looks like 4 locations, but which location was the first one? Was it Toronto?
Toronto.
Okay,
Yes.
Toronto. And what was it like? I mean, you said you were the first pet groomer in Toronto, right? That wasn't a vet, let's call that.
Mhm.
Was it taboo at the time for people to see a pet grooming salon just focused on pet grooming, or were people excited?
Oh,
Were they
they
curious?
were very excited.
Oh, okay.
And many thanks to my education, I was um, pushed just because of education to make certain that I branded my company initially. And I hired a great um, individual who basically put me on the map.
Wow. And what did that look like? Put you on the map and told people you exist and that what you do and how you do it and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, he was a great public relations man, put me in touch with all of the right people on TV and
Well,
um,
hey, you sell yourself. I mean, all you had to do is get you in the right room, right?
yeah, and he was the very first man to develop earlugs on the Globe and Mail.
Huh.
Now, I don't know if you read a newspaper anymore,
Yeah.
but when you opened a newspaper back in the 80s and 90s, even 2000, at the very top of the page, there was 2 little blocks,
Yeah,
and people would buy advertising
sure.
for that. Pampered Paws was the very first earlug to go on to the Globe and Mail.
You're kidding.
Nope.
That is crazy, man. We are marking already a couple milestones here. First pet groomer in Toronto, first earlug in Toronto. I mean, that is incredible. I'm curious, what was it like at the time to have like no true competition out there, right? I feel like right now it's, obviously you can see mobile groomers going out your window every day, right? And at
Yeah.
the time, kind of being standalone must have been unique, huh?
It was a great experience. The clients were really happy. They saw the difference. They were able to see where the animal was being groomed, who was working on them, how clean the environment was, all of the things that attract clients.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, that's great. So obviously, as I mentioned in the beginning of this, you are one of the few people that I'm fortunate to meet that have worked in the industry for quite a long time, right?
Yes.
And with folks like you, I'm always just curious to learn what's changed. And so
Mhm.
I want to, back.
Okay.
I have
Um,
questions around what's changed, and I'm sure there were things that you did at the time that at the time were considered right or proper, but we've learned that maybe they're not anymore, right? Or maybe the other way around. So I don't know what comes top of mind when people ask you what's changed from back then to now in the world of grooming.
oh, I would have to say organization.
Okay, tell me more.
So if we rewind
Yeah.
to 1995, um, my commitment to education expanded further with the founding of the National Agency of Pet Grooming Schools. This vital agency registered with the Canadian government the trademarks securing both intellectual properties and the ability for groomers to call themselves licensed
Okay.
after they had gone through vigorous exams and practical workshops.
Yeah.
It's a trademark that is exclusive to the national agency, and it is the only trademark that exists for licensed groomers.
Okay.
Lots of people will try to use the word licensed,
Sure.
but unless they've gone through the national agency, they can't. And I founded the organization mainly to satisfy the clients because after 10 years had passed, the number of pet groomers that were out there was growing, but their talent perhaps wasn't always there,
Okay.
especially when it came to the safety and handling of the animals.
Yeah. So it
So
progressed the professionalism and the education experience of the average groomer, let's call
that's
it.
yeah,
I love that. I mean,
And
that's
then,
crazy. And it's wild. Like, I feel like even today, you know, people in our industry will make note of the fact that there's no, that we're still lacking in some areas of regulation and licensing and professionalism when it comes to the certification standpoint. But it's interesting to compare that to what you saw pre anything. We were like,
oh
oh, honey,
yeah,
you don't even know what it was like.
yeah. The client needed a solid foundation to
Right.
select their groomer,
Right.
and the groomers needed a solid communication base so that they could get information, get updates,
Yeah.
do workshops, things that really didn't exist in Canada at the time.
That's awesome. So,
And
so,
then,
so licensing and certification has definitely changed quite a bit from when you started to where it's at today. What else is on that list of, like, what was pricing like then? How did you guys price? And
oh, pricing really hasn't changed. It's always based on your overhead. And you've got to identify what your overhead is for the
yeah,
year. How many hours are you prepared to work?
sure.
You know, take away your vacation time, your sick time,
Yeah,
your holiday time, taking the kids to the prom,
yeah.
all those things. You have to calculate all of that in. And then you come up with an hourly rate.
Okay.
And that is the scariest part for the groomers because their hourly rate is huge. Overhead is just out of sight today.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon here in Toronto for a groomer to pay $3,500, $5,000 for rental space. It takes a lot of dogs to pay that bill.
It definitely does. Do you think it always used to be like that?
Yes, it has never changed.
Okay, that's interesting. That's a great perspective,
Yeah. And that applies to any business.
Yeah.
How does somebody select how much a t-shirt is going to cost? They have to factor in all of the overhead and
Right.
how many man hours and
Do you think
just do the math.
do you think competition has changed at all? And I'm not referring to the traditional competitions that you might be familiar with, where you were judging, et cetera, but competition within business. Do you think that that's changed since you started versus where it's at today because
Well,
pet grooming's become more popular?
well, my school certainly put a lot of pet groomers into business, which I'm thrilled about, to witness my students flourishing and growing and being confident and skilled professionals is just, it thrills me to no end.
That's awesome.
Competition is healthy, it's good. It keeps you on track. It makes you a better groomer,
Yeah,
or it puts you at the bottom of the pit, you know, like hairdressing. And I really liken our industry to the hair industry itself. You can go to a top hair salon and pay $300 for a haircut, or you can go to a bottom end one and pay 25.
yeah,
Um, the service is completely different.
yeah,
The outcome is probably going to be completely different. And then the client has to make a decision. And today, unfortunately, they're making decisions based on their pocketbook.
yeah,
With the economy being the way it is, um, mortgage rates where they're sitting at, lifestyle changes are really happening today.
yeah. You're right.
So the pet groomer has to be aware of those changes
One,
and decide what they're going to do because they've got to meet their overhead.
yeah, it all comes back to overhead, and competition is healthy because it gives the consumer options, like you were saying, right? Talk to me about, I'm sure you weren't seeing doodles come in your door every third day when you first started Pampered Paws. How has that trend changed?
Oh, that has really changed. Back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000, it was primarily purebreds that were coming into salons. Then all of a sudden, we started to see more of the mixed breeds, the cockapoos were very popular in the 90s. And today, I think the children and grandchildren of my generation are don't want what their parents had. They don't want that purebred. They want something different. Um, and the marketplace responded and gave them the Goldie Doodles and the Bernedoodles and you name it, and they're mixing everything with poodles. Um, and probably because the poodle is larger and will produce more puppies, and therefore the owner of the breeding animal gets to make more profit, which is sad. Today, we don't see the Bernedoodles and the Goldie Doodles living to 15, 16 years of age. Where a standard poodle, it's not uncommon to see them at 15 and 16. It's just breeding.
Interesting. No, that's a great point. I mean, I never, I guess, thought about that perspective on the, why more breeders are incentivized to be putting those out there. Obviously, I see the younger generations leaning more and more into kind of, the doodle craze and more of these unique dogs, or what were once unique, right? But you're right. I mean, that's an interesting perspective to look as the incentives for breeders to be putting out more doodles are, unfortunately, monetarily in a lot of cases.
And they're not registered with the Canadian Kennel Club or the American Kennel Club. They don't do any pre-testing prior to breeding. It's a bit of a nightmare. And for myself, being a member of the Canadian Kennel Club, and actually a lifetime member now, it really upsets me.
Yeah.
Because the population today is walking into a marketplace where it's just going to cost them huge vet bills because so many problems will be occurring with the health of that mixed breed.
Unknown problems too.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about the change in maybe the average customer that would have come into your salon then versus now. And my intuition tells me that now grooming is a lot more popular than it was then, right? So it's maybe a lot more accessible and available to anybody. But then back then, it was probably a little bit more niche, right? And so what was that average customer like then versus now?
To be quite honest, I don't see a change in the customer.
Okay.
The age range for pet ownership and responsibility hasn't changed at all.
Sure.
It's anywhere is between the mid-20s up until the mid-90s.
Yeah.
The client is or has always been more concerned about where the animal is staying, how it's being housed, who's working on it, what's happening, and can you please get it in and out as quickly as possible?
Yeah.
And sometimes the client is very demanding on the turnaround time. And I often will say to them, I'm sorry, I'm not making a pizza. I can't deliver this in 30 minutes.
Right. This
And
isn't the way.
Why? And I said, well, how long does it take you to get a haircut?
Right. It's an art.
It's an art. And I'm dealing with mountains more hair than what's on your head. Right. So please, you got to give me some time.
Someone that doesn't listen to me when I say, hey, sit still. Okay, no, I like it. That's a good take, that the customer hasn't changed all that much. What about the equipment? Talk to me about the equipment then versus now.
Major changes in equipment.
Okay.
Great companies have worked with me and others to develop tools that are much more functional, primarily in the way of safety. Grooming tables that are now hydraulic, go up and down with a push of a button.
Right.
Dryers that are quieter and more forceful. Cages have pretty much been the same, many thanks to the veterinarian trade.
Okay.
Shoreline has been amazing with their stainless steel cages, and they're insulated and well ventilated, um, so that the animal is comfortable. So not a lot of changes in cages, but the basic core equipment, dryers, tables, bathtubs.
Right. What about
Very
shears? I
rigid.
feel like those have changed quite a bit.
Pardon me?
Shears.
Oh, scissors?
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you about scissors. All right. First of all, the people that made the best stainless steel is Japan.
Okay.
Japanese shears are incredible, have always been incredible. And that dates back to the 80s.
Yeah.
They were producing scissors for hairdressing that outshone anything that we had
Wow.
here in North America. And when I began my franchising in 1996, my very first one was in Tokyo. And I went in, to do my branding, and I'm showing them my Japanese shears, and they were just blown away that back then I was using Japanese shears. Um, yeah. So, yeah, the scissors, incredible. Now they're lightweight, they're smaller, much more manageable.
Right. And probably much more pricey now, too.
Yeah, about the only thing that hasn't changed in our industry are stripping tools for
Okay.
hand stripping of the animals for our terriers. Those knives haven't changed at all. They're exactly the same.
Why do you think so?
Oh, because the Englishmen who developed them back then and the Germans knew what they were doing.
I mean,
That's all I can say.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about equipment. I know one thing that wasn't around that is much more prevalent now as the inception of mobile grooming. Talk to me about that change in the industry.
Well, in 1992, I trained a young woman, very famous father, and she was the very first mobile groomer in the city of Toronto.
Okay.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep. And her
19
daddy bought her a nice little Mercedes and got it all fitted up by
Did you think she
a
was crazy?
designer. No, I thought it was a great idea. The only thing I was worried about was in the winter, what was she going to do with the water lines
Oh, yeah. Right.
for freezing?
Right.
Which is still an issue to this day.
Right. So that was 1992?
Yeah.
1992. Okay.
1992.
When did you really see it start to take off?
Oh, the mobile?
Yeah.
I would say 2000.
Okay.
Really. I mean, lots of franchises out there had them, but they really weren't equipped well enough. In the late 90s, early 2000, they seemed to get their act together, developing vans that were much more practical for common use.
That makes sense. Talk to me about the difference in service options. So what did, if I walked into Pampered Paws in, 1979, and you gave me a piece of paper with, here are your options today. And I walk into Pampered Paws in 2025 and you give me a piece of paper with, here are your options today for your pet. What are the differences I'm seeing on that paper?
There are no differences.
Really?
The only difference is that the services have charged up.
Right. They've matched.
But it basically is the same. Do you
But
want the nails cut? Do you want the ears cleaned? Do you want the teeth brushed?
Okay.
Do you want a shampoo and a blow dry?
The blueberry
Do you
facial
want a haircut?
in 1979?
In the cream rinse industry? Oh my gosh. Yes. It was there.
Okay.
But again, through communication, more and more groomers are now getting
Picking it up.
more current.
Yeah.
And again, they're taking a look at what's happening in the hairdressing industry
Right.
when it comes to shampoos and conditioning and treatments and hair color and all the rest.
That's all the fun stuff.
That's right. There was a time when I used to go into a hair salon in the 70s and I'd get a manicure and a pedicure and they'd wash my hair and color it and cut it, and it was all for one price. As the years went on, the services could be still offered, but I was paying for individual.
Got
So
it.
if I wanted a manicure, I had to pay extra.
Right.
If I wanted a pedicure, I paid extra.
Right.
If I wanted my hair colored, I paid extra. If I wanted it cut, I paid extra. And that's the changes that we're seeing in the pet industry now. That
We're seeing
clients,
coupled a little bit.
yes,
Yeah, that makes sense.
excuse me 1 second.
Yeah, we're seeing it decoupled from, what used to be, hey, pay, one price and I get my nail trim, my teeth brush, my ears cleaned, and a haircut, to now, hey, the haircut's going to cost you this price, and then the nail trim's going to cost you this price, and the blueberry facial is going to cost you this price.
Right. And the detangling is going to cost you more again. And again, that's just based on our overhead.
Right.
Because we've got to cover those costs
Right.
if we're going to stay in business.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. We talked a little bit about this already, but what about the difference in schools? And what I mean is, at the time you had mentioned when you were starting out, it was really, really hard to be able to learn how to become a pet groomer. And I would argue today it's still difficult. It's much
That's
easier,
right.
but it's still difficult. How have you seen the education of the industry change?
Well, in Canada, there was Pampered Paws, and in the States, there was the New York Dog Grooming School. That was it, honey. It was, and we both came out of the dog show world and recognized exactly the same issues, and decided we better start training these young people because the dogs are going to suffer unless we do.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
There's been some changes. Many more schools have opened up. The government has controlled now most of the schools, but they're looking basically, I think, for more fees
Yeah, of course.
coming to their coffers than they are the practical execution of the school. And again, that's why the National Agency of Pet Grooming Schools became so vital, is we have produced so many books on how to train and grooming guides with over 300 breeds, and
Wow. That's
training guides that are over 1,000 pages that get down to the nitty gritty.
right.
You
And today, I mean, you even see the corporates wading into training in schools, etc. Did those exist way back in the day, or when did you see them kind of get into the game?
Oh, again, I would say early 2000.
So it's like the early 2000s is when a lot of people started paying attention.
More so, yeah. And they looked at it dollar wise.
Yeah, right.
Oh, this is a real cash business. Wow, I can make a lot of money at this.
Of
And
course.
then they'd get into it and realize that, again, without the properly trained groomer in hand, they were in trouble. And if they didn't have staff, they were really in trouble.
Yeah.
And Lord help the poor owner that set up that didn't know how to groom because the groomer walked all over them.
Of course. Of course. It's a tale as old as time.
Yeah, it hasn't changed.
Two more questions for you.
Sure.
One, I'm really curious, and we're kind of shifting here away from, then versus now. I'm curious from a high level, you've seen a lot. You are an industry maven. As you're just talking about, some folks call you the grandmother of grooming, and, you helped put together the National Agency of Pet Grooming Schools. I mean, you've done a lot of cool stuff with Pampered Paws as well. I'm curious now that people might look up to you. Who are some of the key figures that you looked up to or that you took inspiration from as you were growing up in the industry?
Oh, well, I would have to say it was dog show people.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I could recite off 1,000 different names, but Blythewood Kennel that raised miniature schnauzers was probably The one that I looked up to the most, Joan Huber, was an amazing handler, an amazing breeder, taught me so much from a young child of all of 15 years of age and just guided me through. She still lives today,
That's
no
awesome.
longer breeding, but was
That's
a
great.
great inspiration. And I dedicated my dog grooming book to her.
Awesome. Well, that's really cool. I mean, it would be a blessing to have met either of them. So that's great. And obviously they did more than they know by giving you inspiration and motivation.
Oh,
Great.
absolutely.
Talk to me about, are there folks in the industry today that you have either mentored yourself or that you see doing great things to push forward the industry as a whole?
Very definitely. Eggie Fang um, is the president of our Canadian Federal Association, and she's been a great leader in that field. I actually founded the agency back in 1995 again,
Oh my gosh.
because the groomers needed a body that would work with the government to bring in changes. And they also needed a platform that would give them insurance at reasonable cost.
Yeah.
Iggy has worked very hard to ensure that the groomers are protected with their income, that with their membership, they automatically get accident insurance, which covers them 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, whether they fall into a car or they get bitten by an animal, their income is protected.
What a-
And that in itself is huge. Not that groomers get a lot of dog bites that are serious, we don't, but we do have day to day accidents,
Definitely. I mean,
slip and falls,
the,
automobile accidents.
yeah, back injuries, carpal
Oh,
tunnel. Yeah.
yes, carpal tunnel, all of those things.
Mhm.
So,
That's great. I mean, that's what a great model for the industry, and just what a pleasure to learn that you've started that. That's really really cool.
and then another person that I'd like to mention is Colleen Zuber,
Okay.
and she has a pet salon in Scarborough. And she really has been my mentor into this new age of marketing and multimedia and how to work the apps that are out there for the photographs and how to change the backgrounds and
Love it.
all of that stuff. She's been amazing
That's
uh,
awesome.
instructor on that and has given many demonstrations to our group so
Yeah.
that others learn how quickly it can be done. Just like simple things like on your iPhone. Who knew that if you long touched the photo and just sort of twirled it with your fingers, you could remove the background?
Oh, I
And
didn't know.
that was long before these apps came out,
Yeah.
you know. So
That's crazy. Shout out Colleen. What a great
yeah.
tip
So,
and what a great thing to teach.
have you tried it on your iPhone?
I didn't even know that exists. I'll try that once we get off
Yeah.
the pod. That's
You
awesome.
just long hold,
Okay.
twist it a few times, that circles around, and then just drag it into your photo album. And it removes all of the background.
That's crazy. All right, I'll have to try that out. Um, Last question for you, Lesley. You've been such a pleasure comparing then and now. I'm curious if we were to duplicate this conversation when I'm your age, and I am doing it then versus now. I want to know what you think I would say for now. So, in other words, where do you think the future of the industry is going? What do you think is going to change? What do you think is going to happen? If I were to give you that crystal ball, what would you tell me?
Well, if you had sat me down 20, 30 years ago, I would have laughed if you had said people would hire others to come and clean up their backyards or that they would go to a dog psychologist. I would have just laughed and laughed and laughed. Today, we're seeing a lot more in physiotherapy, emotional training of the dogs, reaction times. Uh, I, you know, the boarding situation when people go away has changed so much from the traditional kenneling.
Yeah.
I have no idea other than it's probably going to be pet hotels, right? Donald Trump's probably going to be the first one to set one up. I'm sure of it. Um, I, I just, I have no idea where it's going to go, but it's going to explode.
Yeah.
Like every industry has
Right.
gotten so much better. If you look at just the mix masters that are out there, how have they changed in the last 30 years?
Right.
The core is still there,
Yeah.
but the ease of use has changed tremendously.
Well, that's an honest take. So, I appreciate it. Lesley, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate you sharing all of this. This has been an absolute pleasure learning a little bit of then versus now. And what an honor it's been to even just meet you. So thank you again for coming on.
Well, thank you. And I'm delighted you're doing these podcasts and keeping the love of animals alive.
Of
Thank
course.
you.
Sure. Well, thanks, Lesley. We'll catch you soon.